The Chicago Bulls had their Ring of Honor ceremony during the Warriors versus Bulls game at the United Center. The ceremony was supposed to honor the 1996 Chicago Bulls team that won 72 wins, which was at the time the most wins in NBA history. That team is, I would say, one of the most memorable teams in NBA history because I felt that championship run was when Jordan basically said to the league, I'm back and I'm going to own this league for the next few years, which he did. But I felt that was him just coming back with this huge redemption like run. It was historical at the time. I remember it very well because I was in middle school when that run was going down. So yeah, it was pretty special to witness that as a kid. A lot of nostalgia. The Chicago Bulls were the first team I had ever seen win an NBA championship during the early 90s. I got to see the first three-peat as a little kid in elementary school. It was amazing. Like the Bulls were a pop culture phenomenon of the 90s, and I've yet to see a team in my lifetime have that same effect on the culture like the Chicago Bulls did back then. Just they were must see TV. Just everybody would watch the Bulls growing up. Even the nerdiest kids who weren't into basketball would watch the Chicago Bulls. They had that type of impact. That's what I remember vividly really well. It was one of those things you never forget. It was definitely legendary. I think anybody in my age group would say that to any younger person who asks about them. Just none of the teams have compared since. I look at the Warriors title runs. They were still not as amazing when it came to popularity as the Bulls. Just the Bulls had fans all over the country that would come to the games on the road. And on top of that, even the home crowd would cheer for Michael Jordan, but boo the rest of the Bulls. So it was very unique, that type of deal, I would say. But just going to the main topic of that event was that they were announcing all the members of the Bulls who played for that team. So most of the guys showed up, but the most important players didn't. And Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman, they all decided not to show up. I would say I'm not surprised by that because there's some uncomfortableness with Jordan and Pippen. Rodman, he's never been reliable, so it didn't shock me he didn't show up. Um, so that was a shocking. But really, what stole the night was Jerry Krause getting booed. They booed him. Grant, he's not alive anymore, but when they announced his name and they showed his video on the Titantron or scoreboard, whatever you call it, the whole entire fans booed. And then suddenly they saw his widow, Thelma, and I believe the booing kind of stopped when they saw her, but some people still continued. So that made the headlines. To me, I kind of get why the Bull fans boo Krause, but I also think it's illogical at the same time. There's that hatred for Krause because they view him as a man who ended their dynasty that had things not gone the way it did because of him, with him trying to force Pippen out and trying to force Jordan to retirement, that the Bulls could have won more championships. So there is that rage. But I'll address that rage a little bit later. I just want to say that they forget of all the great things Krause did for the Bulls. He did not draft Michael Jordan. That was Rod Thorne, but he replaced Rod Thorne, I believe, a year or two later into Jordan's career. And this man would draft Scottie Pippen. He drafted Horace Grant. He traded Charles Oakley for Bill Cartwright, who was huge on the Bulls' first three-peat run. They needed Cartwright to beat the Knicks. I don't think they beat the Knicks without Cartwright. That guy was always able to contain Ewing when it mattered in those matchups. So he made some big moves that set them up to be a dynasty. Without those moves, I don't think they would have had the run that they had during the 90s. And on top of that, this guy drafted Tony Kukoc, who would be huge during the second three-peat. He was a very important piece of that team, and I don't think without Kukoc they would have had the type of success they did. They may not have won three in a row without him. Just it would have been very difficult. So that was huge. He was able to replace Bill Cartwright with Luke Longley. He signed Ron Harper, who was a great defensive stopper during their second three-peat, just a very important part of that team. He signed Steve Kerr, who was a very important bench player. So, yeah, there's a lot of hate for Krause for what he did in forcing those guys out, but that man was also the architect of those 6 title teams. So you got to give him credit for that. You can't have one without the other. Just he was that important. I do remember my early memories of him as a kid. I just remember the feud Scottie Pippen and him had during the mid 90s where both of them hated each other. And just, I remember that failed attempt he tried to do in trading Scottie Pippen for Sean Kemp during the summer of 94, only for it to be rejected. And then after that trade, that failed trade attempt, there were many other trade attempts following the 94-95 season. I'll never forget the back and forth they had going at each other through national media. To me at the time, it was really insane. As a kid, I looked at him as this ugly fat villain and Scotty the good guy. But as an adult, I can be rational about it and be more objective about it to say that, yeah, Krause was very annoying to be around from what I read. He was a prickly guy. He knew how to push people's buttons. But at the same time, I also felt Scotty was very immature about that now. He signed that deal, and he had really no one to blame but himself for being in that situation. But he took out his anger on Krause, and I remember just him being very upset about it, saying, Jerry pretended to be my friend, and now he's trying to stab me in the back and trade me, and I don't like him anymore, and I hate him, blah, 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 blah. But I thought he was very immature. Looking back, the trade rumors are part of the game, and when you sign a deal, you should just know what you get into. There's no reason to cry about it, because even if you're gonna get traded, someone wants you. So looking back on it, I thought it was just very immature of Scotty, just reflecting on it. And then obviously this came to full blows during the Bulls' final season. If you watch the Last Dance, well, the final championship run, that is. So they had a lot of friction. Michael always going at Krause, Phil Jackson hating Krause. So they hated each other, but they were all supremely talented and they won. But I want to get back to the Bulls fans' rage about Krause. I think Bull fans have this arrogance that if this team wasn't broken up, they would have won 7 or 8 in a row. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. People could say I'm biased because I'm a Spurs fan, but I definitely don't believe they would have beaten the Spurs in 99. I just think the Bulls were very weak after that 98 championship. They barely won by. And I feel when they beat Indiana in the conference finals of that Game 7, there were so many controversial calls that are very questionable. If you rewatch that game, you will see the Bulls really lucked out with some bad refereeing in that game. It was that close where they needed some help to get by the Pacers. Not to say that Pacers didn't choke, but man, they were very, very lucky. I don't think they would have survived a year later playing that same team in a rematch, also dealing with a revamped Knicks that added Sprewell to the team and Marcus Camby. The Bulls were really, really on their last legs during that 98 run. I felt they were fuming, basically. They were really, really barely surviving. And it showed during the playoffs at times. You could see it just. So I don't think they would have survived the next year. Can you imagine them going through the Pacers, the Knicks, and then having to play the Spurs in the finals? And that Spurs team, I believe they would have taken them out. They never had to play a team with 2 great 7-footers at the same time, and David Robinson and Tim Duncan. I know some people will use the 97-98 season as an example when they beat that Spurs team twice, but that Spurs team that competed for that 99 run was completely different than the team the year prior. They had added Mario Elie. Sean Elliott was healthy, and Sean was a guy who always canceled out Scottie Pippen statistically in matchups. You can look that up. He always matched him. He was a perfect foil for Scottie. He was a legit 6'9", and he had a long wingspan just like Scottie and just as athletic. Those guys always canceled out, and I think Rodman was not going to be able to contain both Tim and David. Those guys were just going to own the paint. Jordan would have dominated the matchup with Mario Elie, but the other matchups the Spurs, I felt, would have won. They would have just choked the Bulls out defensively and forced Jordan to be like a 40-plus scorer every game just to win. And even at that old age, I don't think he was capable of doing that stuff. So I definitely believe they would have lost to the Spurs that year. And in 2000, again, having to compete with the Pacers another year, and the Pacers are still a little bit younger. Just I don't think they would have gone by the Pacers in 2000, and even if they did, as much as I hate the Shaq Kobe Lakers, I think they would have lost to them. So there's that bitterness and the arrogance I feel by Bulls fans that they should just be happy they won 6. Man, that's good enough. Heck, as a Spurs fan, I'm happy with the 5 titles they won. I felt they could have won 7 or 8 if it wasn't for bad luck. When I reflect on it, I felt like if Derek Fisher didn't hit that shot in 2004, they probably would have won the title that year. I feel if Manu Ginobili didn't commit that dumb foul on Dirk Nowitzki in 2006, they probably would have beaten the Mavs that year and won it all. And then if Popovich didn't make that screw up in 2013 against the Miami Heat, where Ray Allen hit that 3, they would have won that year too. So you had 3 to 5, that would have been 8. But you can't be greedy. You gotta be thankful for the ones that you won. And for me, 5 was more than enough. Bulls fans got 6, so they got nothing to be bitter about. And it just makes them look really silly when they boo Jerry Krause, well, his widow. It just reeks immaturity, arrogance, I would say, just and lack of humility. That's pretty much all I had to say about that.